Looks like Putin gets the last laugh against Carney after all. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I put out a video the other day talking about how Donald Trump and the Americans were coming at solving this Ukrainian problem, this Ukrainian-Russian conflict incorrectly. That they were hoping that they could bully Putin to come to the table. Now, I got a lot of people coming at me. Well, not a lot, but people came at me and people were trying to convince me that, people unsubscribed for me as a result of that video. And what I found most interesting is that I must have said something correctly because the algorithm turned it right off, even though it had all that activity. Of course, we can see now a couple of days later that I was correct. And rather than harp on that, I just said it out loud. Had you watched the entire video, you would have saw that I was tying all of those things together. And the point of the video was how no matter what the situation was between the Americans and India and the Americans and Russia and India and Russia, Canada was not in a position to capitalize on any of it because Canada has no relationship with Russia, has destroyed their relationship with India, and is trying to convince themselves that they're going to be able to pick on Donald Trump or they're going to hold their breath and wait. They somehow believe that the Democrats are going to take hold in the in the United States. Just absurd. I mean, there was numbers released today by the American government showing that the average family income in the last 6 months in the United States of America has increased by $1,200. Now, you're sitting out there listening to my voice thinking in your mind, wow, I could really get used to having an additional $1,200 come into my house. I could really get out from under the crushing debt that I am on. My credit cards could start to be paid down and I could maybe get out in front of something and, hey, who knows, maybe even take a vacation next year. $1,200 a month. Mark Carney is not doing any of that. He hasn't improved the standard of our living at all. He's, in fact, made it much worse. And before I want to talk to you a little bit about the differences between the actions and the activities and how it makes Mark Carney look completely ineffective, I would say a couple of things. First of all, if you believe that the oil prices that happen all over the world don't impact Canada, if you believe that these things are not all connected diplomatically, then welcome to the channel and I will explain it to you. That just speaks to those people who tried to tell me a lot of things that were a little bit over the line. It's lucky for you all lucky for those people that I wasn't in the mood to pick a fight. They have agreed to a meeting spot, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, and they have selected Alaska. When I read that, well, it still makes me laugh. What a diplomatic slap in the face. There's no other word for that. There's only one reason that Vladimir Putin agreed to come, because he was offered Dubai. He was offered all of these various locations around the planet. But he said, no. I think Alaska is the choice for me. And there's only one reason for doing that. And I'll get into that. But first, I want to just take a comparison between where we are in this situation. As I mentioned, Donald Trump has increased the income of the American family by about $1,200 per month. In addition to that, they figured that they've pulled in about $50 billion in tariffs. So that's going to be really helping their deficit, unlike Canada, who just keeps adding money onto it. Donald Trump has hammered out a deal with Japan, Korea, tentative deals with like 50, 60 countries, has got investment coming in from the Middle East, has solved the conflict in the Congo, or the Democratic Republic of Congo. He just got two countries, Azerbaijan and Armenia, to come to the table together, which is an astounding state, an amazing feat. The things that he has accomplished in his short time make me wonder why anyone who says, oh no, we're all about world peace and all the rest of it and global security and all that, why they would still support Mark Carney, a man who opposes Donald Trump, not because of what Donald Trump does, not because of what Donald Trump's education is, but because by opposing Donald Trump, he makes people believe that he's something that he isn't. How do I know that? Well, because Donald Trump has signed a historic deal with England. Canada doesn't even have a trade deal, not a free trade deal with England. In the EU, Mark Carney is nowhere to be found. Mexico basically laughed his representatives out of the country. All he can do right now is run up and down the country and say, no, I'm going to leave the EV mandates in place. Let me finish reading what all the things that Pierre Poilievre has talked about, see which one of those I can take over and control. Otherwise, let me just continue to keep writing checks. Don't worry about the increase of inflation. Don't worry about the increase of housing costs and the lack thereof of affordable housing. Don't worry about the overwhelming numbers of people that we're bringing into the country. Everything is fine here. Elbows up. By contrast, Trump is turning the Americas into an economic juggernaut, a thing I told you he was going to do back in March when this was all started because of his economic policies. I mean, it's not like Canada couldn't also be doing the same thing. It's just that the Liberal government doesn't have the policies to do that. So all of these accomplishments that Donald Trump has done, and Mark Carney has done nothing. Zero. Zilch. Nada. Nil. In fact, if you look back to the entire 10 years of the Liberal Party, they have accomplished nothing, unless you consider destroying the economy, making the dollar worth nothing, and having housing costs and all the rest of it shoot up through the roof. An accomplishment, and I suppose in some regard that it is. It's just not something that benefits Canadians. And all of the things that Donald Trump seems to be running around the world doing benefits people. He put Iran back 10 years. He stopped the Yemeni crisis. The part of Somalians have come to him petitioning for the United States to recognize them as an independent nation so they can separate. I mean, there's some real changes happening, and many of them, as they look right now, are in very positive situations, very positive things for the planet, or at least for the people on the ground in that area. And I suppose, I mean, how can we think of that in any different light? He promised the Armenian Azerbaijanis that he would allow the American engineers to come out and rip the oil out of the ground. And they just said, you know what, I think it's probably best if we just, put our 100-year-old conflict over there to the side and let's all get paid. Because it's much easier. It's much easier to get along with your neighbor when you're not worried about what they have versus what you have. It's much easier to take a position when you're living quite well. That's why you can see the Liberal Party run around and try to tell you all these things, because they're not living in any hardship. I promise you, if we were to strip the money away from Chrystia Freeland, like freeze up her bank account like she did to people, she'd be a conservative in about 4 minutes. It wouldn't take her long. Because all of a sudden she would realize that money is not never ending and that it's not right to be treated and blah, 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 XYZ. Okay, so now I'll come into this spectacular move. Now, before we talk about that and how bad it looks for Mark Carney, at least globally, and for anybody who understands these things inside of Canada, let's establish one thing. Donald Trump has a New York state of mind. That's where he's from. And in New York, in the state, the city, doesn't matter which one you pick, they hold a grudge. Now, you might think that that means they're going to get mad and start spitting out venom like a far left person who's angry at their parents because they don't agree with their politics. Nope. It's not like that at all. It's like in grade 3, this guy did something to me, and here I am 20 years later, and now I'm going to be able to cash in on that. It's holding a grudge. And you better believe that Donald Trump holds a grudge to the Liberal Party in Canada. Absolutely 100%. There can be no doubt. It's not like he can look at the Liberal Party and say it's completely filled with different people. Even Mark Carney changing out Justin Trudeau, he just came out from behind the curtain. He was still always right there. And if you think that Donald Trump doesn't realize that, if you think that Donald Trump didn't spend 4 years telling himself that if I ever become the president again, you can be darn tootin' that I'm going to be taking my grudge out on those people, then you are far too naive for these particular situations. Because I promise you, it is part of every aspect of his dealing with the Liberal Party. And people say, well, he said he was happy about Carney coming in. Maybe he was happy because he wanted to rub his face in it. I can tell you, though, everybody talked about how, Carney has all this education. Well, the people that caused the 2008 housing crash and nearly put the world into another depression, they also had the same education as Mark Carney. So, in fact, the people that caused the world's economic depression back in the 30s, they also had the same education as Carney. It doesn't. My point is that it doesn't change when money problems turn around and look when they come into your life. It's usually someone with Carney's education that's at the root of it. So now that we've established that Carney has done nothing and is not looking like he's going to get anything done in anytime soon, and Donald Trump, for all the hatred and all the dislike that the Canadian media and the Canadian far left talks about Donald Trump, he's doing some very good things for his people, and he's doing some very good things for people he's not even connected to. They just happen to be in the earth, and he just happens to have the ability to fix the problems that they're experiencing. Oh yeah, no, it's terrible, right? They're talking about nominating him for Nobel Peace Prize. And if he don't get it, you got to believe that there's the politics at play there. It's not just for one thing he's done. In the 6 months, I mean, I've just explained a whole bunch of those things. Vladimir Putin sat around and listened to all of the Canadian politicians and the Canadian media tear at him for years as well. And not just, oh, well, let's take a pause while Biden's happening. No. I mean, Carney, in this particular political cycle, has torn shreds at the Russian people, the Russian military. Now, Donald Trump says, you know what, we're just going to let everybody we're going to just make concessions. We're going to give Vladimir Putin his property. And how do I know that? Because when Zelensky was invited to the meeting, he says, no, there's no reason. This is what Zelensky said, and I'm paraphrasing. There's no reason for me to come because it's parliament in Ukraine that decides whether or not we can give up territory. I don't have that authority. So there's no reason for me to be there. Oh, says I. So they told Vladimir Putin that he can have those two sections, no problem at all. And then Donald Trump let slip that it's all about, there's going to be some territory Putin's got to give up, and there's going to be land swaps, is how he put it. Of course, from the Ukrainian perspective, the only thing that matters is, like if you and I are sitting here in the neutral third party, and I guess I'll have to revisit it, but the only thing that matters is if they can get themselves a Black Sea port. They need a port. They deserve to have access to the waterways on the Black Sea because they are the world's 5th largest grain grower, and they supply most of the grain that's grown in Ukraine goes straight to Africa. So they have to have a port. Grain ships are as big as oil tankers. So here we go. Here's my point. Wrapping up like I do with all my videos. Here in the end is the conclusion or the rant, whatever you want to call it. Donald Trump says, you know what, let's just give him what he wants. Let's just call the land what it is. Everybody can settle down. We'll redraw the line on the map. I can get the critical minerals out, and the thousands of people that are being harmed in this war, that can end. Vladimir Putin says, okay, fine. I will come to the table and I will talk to you about that. Donald Trump says, okay, great. Zelensky says there's no sense me coming because I can't agree on giving up property. That's the position of the parliament. Trump's not worried about the parliament in Ukraine. They will do whatever that he's going to tell them to do because he's throwing truckloads of money over there. And they're all sitting around thinking in their mind, how can I capitalize on these new mines he's going to be digging out of the ground? So, fine. Putin says, yeah. Trump offers him a whole bunch of spots. He said, let me get back to you. Putin says, I'll get back to you. Great. Trump goes about his day, makes a peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia, talks about the economic improvement of his country, $1,200 a month. I'll say that again, $1,200 a month. Just imagine where you're sitting right now, how much money that would, the impact that would have on your life. Anyway, Putin comes back and says, I'd like to meet you in Alaska. And I'm telling you, diplomatically, that was like the greatest slap in the face that you could, as Mark Carney, could ever experience. I mean, that's one of those slow motion ones that they show you on TV or whatever, and you can see the skin rippling as the hand comes across the face, and you're like, "What do you mean? It's Alaska?" No, guys, let's think our way through this. That means that Putin is going to come to Alaska with his Navy and his Air Force, and maybe even some Chinese vessels in support. And they're going to be crawling all over Canadian airspace. They're going to be crawling all over Canadian waterways. They are going to turn northern British Columbia waterways that they say you can't even have an oil tanker in. They're going to turn that into a campground. They're just going to be zipping around there for whatever it is, 2 days. They're going to be dropping, who knows what they'll be doing while they have their permission to be there. And it won't matter because it's the Americans that keep an eye on that part of the world for us anyways. It's not like we have the fleet to keep an eye on it. It's not like we'll be able to go up there with our, 15 kayaks and say, I wonder what they're doing now. Now, I know the people in our Navy like to, want to do a good job, but they're not being provided the tools they need to solve the job. The problem is not the men and women who volunteer to become, military members in this country. The problem is top down. The problem is the liberal and this idea that we don't need a military and somehow we can rely heavily on the United States. Well, you can be sure that when Putin says, I'll come to Alaska, I'll just be bringing these 15 battleships with me or whatever, and then this squadron of jets, which, if you don't mind, can we just use one of your airways to land and refuel? And can you please provide for them a place to sleep? And so, though they will be hammering out a deal, and I have no doubt in my mind that Putin will accept the terms, come away, instantly making his oil just fine on the world market all over again, instantly making India quite happy and chopping off the tariffs that they're facing right away, instantly making Iran irrelevant to the conversation, doing all kinds of things that will allow for the Americans to even go further into this, economic boom that they're experiencing. Canada, by contrast, will be sitting there wondering why Carney can't get anything done. And of course, the reason that Carney can't get anything done, well, there's two reasons. One, people don't like him. Globally, they don't like him any more than they like Trudeau. And he has walked all over Europe and done all kinds of mistakes, and they're aware of that. So he's what you call, radioactive or whatever they like to say. The other reason that Canada won't get anything is because even if people did like Carney, the Liberal government has no idea what they're doing. They don't have a diplomatic bone in their collective bodies. They treat politics like it's high school or elementary school in many cases. It's like it's grade 5 and it's all clicky, clicky, clicky. Well, we're all Canadians right now in one gigantic clique, and that clique is economic poverty. That clique is out of reach food prices and out of reach housing prices. That's the only clique that we happen to be in. And the media, who is relying heavily on taking the funding from Mark Carney, is telling you whatever Mark Carney wants them to say, because they know that they have a serious trust issue. They know that the population doesn't trust them. They know that the only people that are listening to them are still people who watch cable TV. And that is smaller and smaller with every passing day. All of these news organizations, the 4 or 5 of them that follow all of the federal politicians or even the provincial politicians around this country, they're all from the same 2 or 3 organizations, no matter how many microphones they put out in front of you. Well, they're relying heavily. So how can you listen to a word they have to say? That's why every time it gets worse and worse and worse, and you're looking around, you're thinking it's terrible, somebody somewhere says, oh no, there's a poll that says everybody is wonderful and lovely. I don't know anybody, so they're not polling in my area. I can tell you that right now. Maybe they're polling, with people that already own their houses and are living comfortably on investments that Brookfield is looking after. I'm not sure. I just know that I don't believe most of it. I know that Vladimir Putin selected Alaska so that he could thumb his nose at the Canadian government, so that he could tell the Canadian government, say whatever you want, but those are Russian vessels cruising up and down your coastline, taking pictures and doing whatever it is, zipping drones over and having all kinds of, just laughing his butt off at the lack of response that the Canadian population, the Canadian government can have. And this is, of course, something that's important. We have to understand that the diplomacy is like the American mindset, the New York mindset. It holds a grudge, and it can come back and bite you at any given time. And if you don't know what you're doing, if you haven't selected the people that are important, then of course your country is going to become a laughingstock. What did you expect was going to happen? Isn't that what you would do? Isn't that what you would do as you sit out there telling yourself that, no, Carney can scrap it together? If you were sitting around and somebody upset you at work and 2 years later you found a way to get revenge, you wouldn't take it? Of course you would. And you would laugh all the way to the coffee room, telling yourself that you finally got even with that person by pulling their chair out from under them or whatever it is that, this kind of thing happens. Sitting around trying to convince yourself that by calling other world leaders and other parts of the world names and picking fun at them and throwing billions of dollars into having their military confronted, clearly that's going to come back and bite you. Clearly. And really, Canada should have been looking after the Canadians, right? Mark Carney, the Liberal government, they wanted to look after the world. They wanted to tell you that it was all no borders. They wanted to tell you all of these Marxist things. They wanted to get in bed with the Chinese. Well, they might be sailing up and down our coast in support of the Russians. Who knows? Could be North Korean ships out there. Because just like there's North Koreans learning how to make war in the Ukrainian conflict. North Korea doesn't have a lot of lights in its inbound of its country, but it's got a fairly large navy. It's bigger than Canada's, I can tell you that right now. And that's why they picked Alaska. Not because of going onto American soil, not because of, anything else. They picked Alaska because that's as close as they could get to the Canadian Arctic and not violate any treaties. And it's a slap in the face of Mark Carney, and anybody out there who tries to convince themselves that it's anything other than that really needs to take stock of what you understand about the global geopolitical situations that we are living in as a country. Because we did all of this, we allowed our government for the last 10 years to drag us into this mess. We are still the most expensive taxed country in the Western Hemisphere anyway. We are still rocketing into the poorhouse. Our rent rates are through the roof. The cost of real estate is as high as any on earth. I mean, there are island countries that pay less for their houses than Canada does. We should have been focusing on making ourselves look better, feel better, be in a better position fiscally. And we could start by getting this Liberal government out of the way and getting our natural resources up and running and flowing and cashing in like the rest of the planet, because then we can just start to send it down into the global south and they will begin to experience the prosperity that the Western world has been experiencing now for 150 years. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I would encourage you all to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'll talk to you next time.